why is equalization such a big issue for Albertans?
I saw that Mike was being very diplomatic. I'm going to be less so. The reason it's such a big issue for Albertans is because I don't think Albertans have any problem at all helping out Prince Edward Island. Small population, we recognize they have limited means to raise taxes, and it's going to be more costly to deliver programs and services. So I think that may explain why 40% are still in favor of keeping some form of equalization. And sure, let's help out the small provinces. They are not in favor of continuing this money funneling through Quebec, through being laundered through Ottawa to essentially support programs and services that are more generous in Quebec than anywhere else in the country. There's two things that I think really chap Albertans. Number one is they refuse to develop their own natural gas resources. Natural gas has been a significant source of revenue in Alberta. It's part of the reason why we are a net payer. And so imagine if Alberta said, oh, we're not going to develop our natural gas in Ottawa. Can you help us out by transferring us some money? It wouldn't fly. The second area that's incredibly frustrating is on hydroelectric power. They massively subsidize their businesses and residents and then turn around and say, oh, gee, we're short. If they just happen to charge market prices for their electricity, they would generate enough of a dividend so that they wouldn't need significant equalization transfers at all. The third problem is they've been bragging about having surpluses and putting aside money into a prosperity fund. And so at the same time as Alberta is running massive deficits, you have Francois Legault saying, we don't want your dirty oil. We don't want to develop your natural gas. We don't want to export your natural gas, but keep the money coming. That's the reason why Albertans voted significantly in favor of addressing and taking equalization out of the Constitution.
Now, in your observation, and again, at the time of filming here, we don't have the full picture, but do you see a bigger divide between rural Alberta and more urban Alberta, Danielle?
I think so. I think it'll be even stronger in rural Alberta, but I'm expecting it to be strong in Edmonton as well, where the NDP have the majority of seats up there. Because even under the NDP in our province, the finance minister at the time, Joe Ceci, pointed out this fiscal stabilization formula, which is part of the transfers, is unfair to Alberta. When they faced a massive collapse in our energy prices, we were not entitled to the same per capita transfers as have been available historically in the past. And so I think that even the NDP realizes there's something that's not working for Alberta in the way this program is delivered.
So do you think, and I'll ask this to both of you, maybe Mike, you want to jump in first, what impact will there be, if any, by this result on equalization on the rest of Canada, on Alberta? Like, will Justin Trudeau take this and say, okay, here's my marching orders, or will this just fall on deaf ears?
No, I agree with what Danielle said, except I think equalization really is only one of the issues. It's been prompted by the things Danielle talked about. I don't think equalization will be hardly affected at all. I think the Premier is using this as a leverage to just reopen general issues about fiscal federalism in the country. Like, just to have perspective, the $20 billion in equalization payments is about 3% of the federal budget. But there are other transfers. This is where Mr. Kenney, I think, wants to look at. There's all these other transfers. Ottawa transfers about $100 billion a year to the provinces. Equalization is only $20 billion of that. And there's some inequalities in there too. So I don't think equalization itself will probably change. I think it's a smaller issue, but it's a symbolic issue. That's the point. The Premier wants to use it as a symbolic issue to open up these federal fiscal interprovincial problems that he sees and the disadvantages. And one thing that Danielle said was excellent. There's a fiddle, it's the only word I can use, in the formula for determining revenue for Quebec. Quebec Hydro subsidizes its consumers. In other words, it charges people in Quebec low hydro rates. So, of course, the provincial government says we don't have the revenue. So, and only 50% of it is counted in the formula anyway. So, in other words, hydro revenue is way undercounted than oil and gas is. And so that really discriminates against Alberta.
Okay,
I think that's another thing the Premier wants to get that changed, I think.
I only have 40 seconds before commercial, but Danielle, is this result symbolic? Will anything be accomplished with this equalization vote?
Well, it has to. The premier of Alberta has to act on it. He's already facing a lot of problems internally with his own party because of some missteps in how he executed on COVID. Other premiers managed to navigate that better than he did. But one of the underlying issues that was causing frustration is that he did do a cross country tour of a panel asking for all the ways in which Alberta could assert itself in Confederation, and he hasn't acted on any of it. And so this would be one that he could act on. He could also look at this as a bit of a indicator that he can move forward on some of the other things, collecting our own provincial income tax, having our own Alberta provincial police force rather than the RCMP, having our own Alberta provincial pension plan, and a few other things.